us. This is actually our first day virtual community meeting since we launched these back in the beginning of the year. And if all of you team members recall, the reason why we launched the virtual community meeting was to make sure that we kept everyone connected and updated on the events as we went into the COVID-19 operational management and making sure that everyone stayed status and that we were connected to what was going on, because we didn't really know what was going on internally and externally at the time. These meetings have evolved since that, and we, like today, are going to engage with external partners that help us understand the landscape of what's happening, both from a housing perspective, how housing is affected through COVID, what the changes in the political landscape or the economic or the financial landscape means to Skid Row Housing Trust and our partners. So we've been really excited about being able to share what Skid Row Housing Trust does with our outside partners through some of these recordings. But we've also been more fortunate to share and get information from our external partners that are new and some that have been existing, into how we can incorporate and implement some of these really significantly unique times. So in this last month since we last spoke, we have obviously experienced a lot of change. We're seeing that the COVID numbers are ticking up. We saw that the election and voting became solidified and is in the process of being transitioned. It's a little bumpy, as everyone knows, but we're in process of transitioning. We're heading into the flu season and winter months, but there's been a lot of accomplishments still as it relates to all of our team members out in the field. There's still a structured response of what we're doing and how we're doing it, how we're going about responding to some of the needs that our residents have, that our employees have, that our on-site partners have, and just the preparation behind the scenes to make sure that we balance a very unique model. Again, none that we've ever, not just us, but any of us and our partners experience heading into the winter months. So want to take a special time out to thank all of the case managers that are implementing back into the field and on site. Want to make sure we extend, as we always do, a deep sense of gratitude to our property managers and property management team, because they did not go off site and had to make sure that the buildings were overseen, during times where we were getting a lot of different, and interesting, information of what we had to do and to back into. So there's been a lot of outside changes that you're going to hear from in just like 2 minutes, but some of the relationships that we have and partnerships that we have are getting more active with us, as it relates to our agency partners like HACLA or LASA or DHS, our banking partners like Union Bank or US Bank or NEF or NFF. Because we're headed into year end, there's a lot more activity in between our partners and us. So thank you to all of the people that are dedicating themselves to getting through this last quarter as we end the year and head into the holidays. So with that, I'm going to go on to video and going to introduce our speaker for today, Nan Roman. We're really excited, about her and a lot of the information that she's going to bring to us. So as a quick intro, Nan Roman is the president and CEO of the National Alliance to End Homelessness. That's a public education, advocacy, and capacity building organization. She is leading a national voice on this really important issue of homelessness. Under her guidance, the Alliance has successfully identified and promoted innovative strategies for ending homelessness that have been adopted by communities across the entire country. In her role, Ms. Roman works closely with members of Congress and the administration, as well as with officials and advocates at the state and local levels. She collaborates with Alliance partners to educate the public about the real nature of homelessness and effective solutions that are proven to work. She's researched and written on the issue of homelessness. She regularly speaks at events around the country and frequently serves as an expert on the issue as it relates to media and media relations. Her perspective on homelessness and its solutions comes from more than 20 years of local and national experience in the areas of poverty and community-based organizations. So we're really honored to have Nan Roman join us today. We're really excited to hear the information that she's going to share with us. We have a lot to learn from her. There's a lot that she has been very interested about us. So with that, I would like to introduce Nan Roman.
Here we go. Hello, Lee. Very nice to see you.
Hi, Nan. I think you might be on mute.
I'm not.
Oh, there you are. Okay, you're not on mute and we see you. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Very, very, very much appreciated. We have a lot of team members and partners online right now. They're very excited to hear from you. So without further ado, just kind of getting started. For those of us on the line that really have not known in depth what you do and what you've accomplished, can you tell us a little bit about the National Alliance to End Homelessness, like what that organization does?
Sure. I haven't. Can you hear that?
I will go on mute when you are talking.
Okay, might help. Thanks. Thank you so much. Well, the National Alliance to End Homelessness has been around since the early 80s when homelessness first began to emerge in the country, in the modern era anyway. And we really do, well, I'll just say that we're just really focused on trying to figure out what works best to end homelessness and then get more people to do that. On the solutions, we're not a membership organization. We really focus on national advocacy. So we just use data and research and information to figure out what those solutions are. And then we work with Congress and the administration to get solid policy and resources behind those solutions. And we work in some communities to help them implement those solutions. That's basically what we do.
And what brought you specifically, to the cause of finding solutions to homelessness and kind of dedicating your career to that? Because a very, very big platform that you influence on a regular basis. What drew you to that?
Well, I think a little bit just fell into it, to be honest. But I started out my career in national housing advocacy. It wasn't what I thought my career was going to be because I had gotten my master's degree in cultural anthropology with a focus on East Africa. So that wasn't exactly the direction I was thinking I would end up going in. But I moved to DC and I ended up getting a really great job working on housing advocacy. Largely at the time, this was on issues around stopping the loss of affordable housing during what they used to call the period of urban renewal, when slums were being removed and highway construction was wiping out whole neighborhoods. And when redlining was very common, and when multifamily housing was, a lot of it was being converted to condos and condominiums and co-ops. I think we often don't remember that, and except for New York City, for many, many years, rental housing or multifamily housing was all rental. There was not really home ownership of multifamily housing at all. And that was the period when that was changing. We called that residential displacement. And after working there at the National Association of Neighborhoods, I put in a couple of years working at the community level, delivering direct services, but I really wasn't as good at that. I didn't think as I was at the policy side. So in the late 80s, I got involved at the Alliance. And I think the reason I stayed there was that I stayed with our group is that homelessness always just seemed like such a solvable problem to me. It's not that it's an inconsequential problem, but 500,000 people a night, that's really not beyond our ability to solve that problem as a nation. So I've just persisted, obviously unsuccessfully, in trying to really eliminate homelessness.
I mean, it's awesome and sad at the same time to hear you put it in that context, because it is a very large problem that we have to fix, you know, just humanistically, economically. But when you say it like that, like, hey, this is how, these are the numbers, it really should be solvable. You know, it's good to hear it placed that way. It's actually good for us. Like, I was writing that down. I was like, I'm going to use that one. I'm going to use Nan's quote every time I'm talking now. So thank you for that. So
I probably stole it from someone else. So.
We're borrowing from each other. Yeah. Um, so National Alliance to End Homelessness does a lot. It's like fairly comprehensive for those of you that are on the, you know, the line. They some of their solutions are very, very coordinated. It includes rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, a crisis response mechanism. It really focuses on increasing employment and income for individuals, you know, to make sure that people can stay housed. So Nan, can you elaborate a little bit on, like, that's a full spectrum ecosystem. That's very interesting. We obviously prescribe to that, you know, and participate in that, but you do so much more. Can you kind of just share with the team on the line, you know, a little bit more about all of that? And then is there an example that you've come across over the years in a city or a company or a region that's actually done it well, like how to comprehensively address all of that?
Sure. Well, I would just, the caveat I'd offer at the beginning is that you're actually providing assistance to people, and we're just advocating for all of this stuff. So it's a little easier what we do, I think. But overall, we see housing as the driver in homelessness, notwithstanding the fact that people may also certainly need services. But you know, lack of housing is what defines homelessness, and people who are housed, people who have a home, aren't homeless anymore. So the goal, we feel, is to get people into housing as rapidly as possible. We're big proponents of housing first, and I would say rapid rehousing and increasingly a lot of permanent supportive housing falls into that, in trying to get people in, not having a lot of preconditions to entering housing. To get people, ultimately to get people into housing in a much wider scale, we need a lot more rent subsidies and we need more supply. But until we get those things, people are not going to be able to afford a place to live on their own without a subsidy. So they're going to have to be doing a lot more sharing moving forward, we think, to get more people into housing, sharing of housing. And also the motel and hotel work that's being done in California and other places, that first as temporary accommodation, but now I think increasingly people are thinking there might be a way to get more affordable housing online faster and cheaper than new construction or rehabilitation. Those are also things we're interested in. We have a consultant right now trying to scope out really what the opportunities are there, also in commercial and retail property, to create more housing supply faster and cheaper. But since we don't at present have enough housing for everybody, and we don't get enough money in the homelessness system to help everybody, we do have to have a coordinated approach so that we're using the money as strategically as possible to try to reduce the number of people who are homeless. And the basic principles we ascribe to around that are to help the people with the highest needs first. But that coordination is not really, I think where we stand now with coordinated entry is not working so well, because there are too many people who are really not getting anything. The very highest need people are sometimes getting into housing, but a huge percentage of people are really not getting anything. And most of those are individual adults who are really, I think, being left behind by our systems. And of course, also there are a tremendous number of unsheltered people. Nationally, as you well know in California, nationally, 37% of people who are homeless are unsheltered, but in California, that number is 72%, and in LA, it's 75% last time I looked at it. So that really is not sustainable, and we have got to find a solution to that. And the system needs to have something for every person. And I think in California, in LA in particular, one of the reasons we have so many sheltered people is that there really was never a lot of investment in Los Angeles historically in shelter, and now it's just too big a nut to crack, really. Uh, and the conflict between, if you don't have enough resources and you're trying to balance the need for shelter with the need for housing, there's really not an answer to that problem. Two other key issues I just wanted to mention briefly that we would add to the list that you gave at the beginning, Lee, is the importance of racial equity and addressing racial disparities in our system if we're going to make a dent there, and really the importance of moving really fast to help people. Right now, I feel like it takes a long time from the time someone becomes homeless till they get any help. And that's costing us a lot of money. It's costing them much more than money. And we really need to move faster. As an example, there are several examples, but just quickly, I think the state of Connecticut has actually done a really good job of systematically taking on issues. They work, there's a coalition, Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness is very effective. They do a lot of work with the state. They really focus on best practices. They've ramped up diversion statewide, and they're diverting a high percentage of people away from shelter and back into housing before they have to enter shelter. They got funding to house people reentering from the criminal justice system into housing right away. They've been very intentional on race equity. They've done several years worth of statewide training on rapid rehousing combined with critical time intervention, and have very good outcomes on rapid rehousing. They've done a ton of permanent supportive housing. And the state of Connecticut, which doesn't have the highest housing costs, but they're not the lowest either, now has fewer than 3,000 homeless people in the state, only 10% of whom are unsheltered. So I think that's one place that's done a pretty good job.
Going back a little bit of what you were saying, because this is one of I'm sure you know this, but just to recap it really quickly, Skid Row Housing Trust has been around for 30 years. And I think that if we went back and spoke to our forefathers and our foremothers that started this, they really thought, hey, if we develop these, 10, 15 properties, we will address the problem. There's no way that homelessness will ever enter into this crisis situation in the future. Again, this is like 30 years ago, to where we are today. And then yet here we are, so we don't spend an extraordinary amount of time, reflecting back in history, but we do want to see lessons learned, to the point that you said, there's a very minimal investment into infrastructure and solutions. And then net, this is where you end up today. And now we have this very unique year with just the economics and the pandemic. It's not theory anymore. That's another thing that we talk about here at the Trust, is people had theories that if these systems failed, what could happen. And the unfortunate upside of COVID this year is really just proving what happens when these theories become reality. And you were talking about the trajectory and what we can do. And the Trust is planning and preparing to basically double in size. So what took us from year 0 to year 30, we're going to go from that, about 2,000 residents, serving 2,000 residents, 200 employees, to serving 4,000 or 5,000 residents, 400 or 500 employees in 3 years. and we still won't match the need, so it'd be really, I think, interesting for me, for us to hear what your lens is on the trajectory, because we know it's coming. We don't want to talk about it because it's very hurtful. I mean, us as a nation, not here at the trust, but the trajectory was coming, and then this year exacerbated it. And so what is some of the message, the information that you have, that you share, that we could help share just around that forecast?
Well, I think, we really were doing a pretty good job on homelessness, actually, between about 2007 and 2016. The number was going down, and it's not, I mean, the issue you're talking about, really was caused, that it exploded, was because more people were coming in than we could get out. Even though I know in Los Angeles, you all are housing more and more people every day, and as you say, expecting to house even more, and yet more, until we do something about the inflow, that it's just going to keep going up. Overall, since 2016, homelessness has gone up 3%. That's not too bad, but when you look into it in a little more detail, it's not as good, actually. Sheltered homelessness is down 5% during that period, but unsheltered homelessness is up 20%. And among subpopulations, it's a similar kind of picture. Families are down 12%. I really think, and you don't have so many, strangely, I think, I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but you don't have so many homeless families in LA as a lot of other places do. Like New York's, for example, which is the only other jurisdiction that has more people than you do who are homeless. Families nationally down 12%, veterans down 6% since 2016. Youth down 8.5%, 2017 to 2019. The data doesn't go back as far for them. But individuals are up 11%. Everybody else is down, but individuals are up 11%. So that's what's driving the increase. And we're clearly not doing what we need to do for individuals, especially unsheltered individuals. And that's up 25%, 2016 to 2019. And your numbers really are in California and Los Angeles, I'm sad to say, are driving a lot of the national increases.
Yeah, and it was very interesting for you to share all of that, because, like I said, being in a 30-year-old organization, we have so much data, we have so much objective information, we have so many subjective stories. We predominantly serve individuals, so that is the area that we understand and we know, and we get nervous about, for the exact reason that you said. And there's a lot of driving factors as to why that exists. But it was, again, it's always good and educational for us to learn from an outside perspective, what that means and how that plays a picture, not just in LA, but in California, and then comparison, to the nation. So, very much appreciate that. And kind of maybe.
Can I just say one quick thing too about, I think when you're looking back 30 years, the other thing that was going on really in the 90s was this idea of ending chronic homelessness, which I think is when you all really got started. And that's not wrong. That construction, which was that we have this group of high need people, most of whom have disabilities, that can't get out of the homeless system on their own, and permanent supportive housing will solve it for them. And if we got all those people into housing, the system would run more smoothly. All of that remains true. It's just that the system now is overwhelmed by people, and it can't handle everybody. And even the chronically homeless people, or people with disabilities, I don't think chronicity itself is so important anymore, because there's coordinated assessments. The people, it was really a marker for disability that they couldn't get out. Now you don't need to wait for that. You can, assess people's needs. It's still a great thing to do, and we're not going to solve the problem without really focusing on that population. But we're overwhelmed now by just too many people coming in.
Yeah, part of our charter, as we evolve, is not just, solving homelessness, like it's also leapfrogging and mitigating that slide into homelessness in the first place, much to what you're talking about is, what are the influencing factors? Because once the slide happens, I think you said this in the very, very beginning, of your presentation, is there's a flaw in the logic, where when you slide into homelessness, there's a certain amount of time that, is considered chronic before a system comes in and helps you again. So that is like you could see why they were thinking that, maybe, in the like you said, the early 80s, late 80s, early 90s, but that doesn't mean that the logic is flawed. And how do you systemically address that while trying to solve it? How do you make it healthy while trying to solve it at the same time?
Yeah.
One of the questions that we get often that would be really interesting to hear your perspective is, homelessness is increasing everywhere, but what we hear about now is that, wow, I'm seeing homelessness in my community. I live at the beach, I live in the country, I live in the mountains, I live near a ski resort. What is some of your views, your land, your information that really kind of delineates the like metropolitan areas from other parts of the country where we're seeing, increases? Can you shed some light on that for us?
Well, I think the increases, actually about half of COCs have increases and half had decreases in 2019. That's the most recent national data that we have. And it's reasonably coastal. So the places with the largest numbers are East and West Coast, a little bit less the southern coast, but still to some extent. It very much sticks out. Your numbers in LA and the New York City has you beat. I think they have about 80,000 homeless people, or the last, it's probably more now. You have, I think, 56,000, something like that. The next highest is Seattle with 11,000. So that's the extent, that's why, I mean, you do have a very big COC. They're just geographically huge, but that's why, to some extent, your numbers and New York's numbers really do kind of drive the ship. The inflow, I think a lot of it has to do with housing costs, and it's, housing costs are where they're going up. They're going up everywhere, but they're going up much more. They tend to be going up much more in larger cities, and that's what causes the inflow. Most larger cities are seeing more encampments and increased unsheltered homelessness. It's become very typical. The mailman must be here. I don't know if you can hear my dog, but that's a common refrain on Zoom meetings these days. Um, so I think it's not dissimilar. You're big, but your rates are high, and it isn't happening everywhere. It seems to be largely linked to housing costs.
One of the items that you touched upon a little bit earlier is just like the correlation of data that we already know, that COVID this year has affected low income people disproportionately, and they are at greater risk of slipping into homelessness. What are some thoughts that you have around that, and what do you think organization like ours can do, influence, advocate, communicate, to prevent this from happening?
Yeah, I think it's low income people obviously affected, and by the recession as well, and also most racial minorities are also disproportionately affected, and of course the racial unrest and the division in the country also has really brought that to the fore. And I think there's a larger issue here around racial inequality and income inequality. That's like a bigger picture thing that we need to solve. So I'm not going to talk about that specifically, but there's a lot of work that can and should be done to prevent disproportionality and disparities that groups like your organizations like yours can address. I think one thing is just looking at the issue always through a racial lens and trying to figure out what the racial dimension is to it, because there pretty much always is a racial dimension that needs to be addressed. You could look at the feeder systems where people are coming to you from. Certainly, corrections and foster care tend to disproportionately send lower income people and people of color into homelessness, and that's the cause. I mean, we know that there's a lot of disproportionality by race. And also, I should say we should be looking at disability status and gender identity, because those are play out not the same, but result in disproportionalities. And these feeder systems that we don't have much control over are what cause the disproportionality. So maybe that's not our fault as much, but we could push back on that. But what is, within our purview to look for and remediate is disparities in our own work. And I know that in Los Angeles, you've already been doing work on that to use your data to find disparities in outcomes and to address those disparities. And another thing that, another way to do that, which I'm sure you're also doing, is to engage people with lived experience who are people of color in the planning, and to help you figure out the solutions and what people need. So all the things and I know you're already doing to really do a better job of being fair and addressing equity and solving the problem.
Yeah, I think, it's important for, us to hear, our partners to hear that are on the line that are calling in, but also our team members. It's it's a unique place to be, and one at Skid Row Housing Trust, like I said, 30-year-old organization in LA, in a highly, inequitable geographic area, and the spirit of why it was created in the first place was really just to get ahead of this, for this to disallow to actually occur in the future. And then now we are experts. We're considered experts because of this track record of real estate development, of programs, of services, of property management, of jobs, and the opportunity and the responsibility, the honor of making sure that we can influence what needs to get, influenced, the burden sometimes, because, we're a large organization and we have to make sure that we do things the right way on a daily basis. So it's very good to hear that, even though there oftentimes are things that we may know or have already heard about. It is important to hear from experts and advocates at a national level like you. So I appreciate all of that. 2 more questions and we're almost done. Thank you so much for all the time you've extended us today. So obviously in January, as the system and processes kind of unfold, we'll have a new president, administration, new Congress, reconfigured, legislative bodies kind of throughout the nation. How do you view the election outcomes, nationally, and what do you expect, to occur in California, and maybe a little bit of a drill down specifically in Los Angeles?
So the Trump administration was not great on homelessness, and so therefore I think we'll do better in a Biden administration. It's really not clear exactly what's going to happen. We don't know I don't think we really know what they'll do until they get into office and you see the secretaries and so forth, but they're certainly saying all of the right things. So in their transition website, they call for vouchers for all people who are eligible. And indeed, they talk about the fact that housing should be a right. They talk about providing a renter tax credit for people who don't qualify for a voucher, but have housing problems. They commit themselves to a housing first approach. They propose providing a boatload of money to increase the supply of affordable housing through the trust fund, tax credit, and many other kinds of steps. So I think we'll be able to work. We've already met with the transition team. And are many of whom we all know. So I think we'll be able to work productively with the administration. But there are going to be some very serious challenges moving ahead. I don't think that housing or homelessness are going to be top priorities, just because there are so many things on their plate. COVID and the recession being obviously at the top, and trying to unify the nation in some way. I think housing will be higher than it has been in the past. All the Democratic candidates had very nuanced housing proposals. That has never happened in my lifetime. So I think people are realizing that housing is a big problem, but and it's moving up the agenda, but I don't see it at the top. And Congress is going to probably, we'll see, but is probably going to be split, and it's going to be very politicized, I think, which makes it hard to get anything done. So big, bold initiatives, just very hard to see that that's going to happen. And there's not going to be very much money because although the federal government can really print money, so they could decide to spend a whole lot of money, but I don't see us getting in on that in any big way. I don't really know how things are going to play out in California and Los Angeles. I know there's several, there's looking forward that there are a number of really serious state initiatives focused on producing more affordable housing. I know that Governor Newsom seems committed to it. You have a new roster of players in LA. I wouldn't be surprised if Mayor Garcetti ended up in DC before too long. So I don't really know, but I do think that states and localities are really going to be broke because they can't print money and they're not getting tax revenues. So I think it's going to be, I think, we're not going to have to fight the ideological fights, but it's going to be a competitive environment for resources.
Yeah, and again, thank you for that and sharing it in the perspective that you did, because that's, again, obviously as a nonprofit, we talk about, revenue and performance and how we get funded and, items like that, but heading into a deficit environment across the nation, that does affect taxes, which affects funding, and so really just trying to kind of get ahead of that and learn about it and understand and educate ourselves is a good idea, is what we need to do and how we need to prepare. So thank you for sharing that. Last question, oftentimes people always ask this is, what's the best way for individuals to get involved in providing solutions to our unhoused neighbors? How do we get more people into homes?
Well, I think the first thing is, which I'm sure everyone on the call does, but the general public doesn't always, which is understanding the problem, what the problem of homelessness really is about and its solutions, and that it's largely a problem that's created by these larger economic issues, that housing is just costs more than what people make, and by structural and historical racism. And it's not really caused by people's individual characteristics. Most people who have the individual characteristics that the general public probably would ascribe to causing homelessness, most of those people are living in housing. It's only a minority of people with behavioral health disorders or illnesses or who are homeless. So I think we need to address the misconceptions that are out there. The second thing is, I think there's a lot that both the people on the call here and your organization, as well as people in the community, can do to advocate for this. I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. There's no question about it. And in the state and in the nation, advocating for resources, advocating for equity, speaking to your elected officials is what moves the dial. And it's really important, and anybody can get involved in that. And then, of course, there's working directly with people, if that's what you want to do. Obviously, that's what you all are doing, and members of the public can do too, either through organizations like yours or through volunteer work or whatever. But I think there's plenty that everyone can do. And the people in Washington, elected officials, and I'm sure there too, who they really respond to is not us, it's you. And I think we can try to get the policy stuff lined up, but they're not going to do it because we want to do it. They're going to do it because they see it as an issue to people like you all.
Well, again, thank you for all of that. One of the things that we take obviously very seriously on our side of the fence is being the advocates on individual basis, but being advocates at an entity, at an organizational level, and finding that balance between being the right amount of squeak in the squeaky wheel, right? And influential and saying, no, I'm here again. We're sharing the story, I'm here again. So, but again, thank you for articulating that. I think it was really important for us to hear, for our team, our team members in the field, our partners that are on the line, our bankers, our agencies. So, but Nan, thank you for taking all the time that you did today. I know how busy you are, especially, heading into the holidays and with this transition and everything that you're about to do as it relates to policy on behalf of organizations like ours. So on behalf of our team, ourselves, our board, thank you very much for everything you do. Thank you for taking your time today. Thank you for talking to us. So
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Because I want to hear the next speaker also.
Yeah.
Around if anybody has any questions. But thank you so much for inviting me. I've worked with you all for many years, so I look forward to continuing that.
Yes, awesome. All right, well, we are going to launch the video, and right now I'm going to get off the screen, and Jet, I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, Nan. It was so fantastic listening to you talk about all of the history and background, and then the things that we have to look forward to, and the current state of what policy and advocacy look like at the very top of the national level. And Nan, we're all so grateful to have had you here. We are in the middle of our, not quite the middle, we're at the beginning of our year-end campaign, Do Something to End Homelessness. And for those of you who don't know or haven't seen our campaign, it is a peer-to-peer campaign where we're encouraging our supporters to fundraise their way and providing tools and content that they can share with their friends and personal networks. Unfortunately, Teresa Winkler, our speaker for today, was not able to join us. She is hilarious and fantastic, and she is a Speak Up graduate. For those of you who don't know CSH Speak Up, they work with people with lived experience of homelessness to help them learn how to tell their stories as a form of advocacy. And Teresa is well known to every elected official who represents us. I think it's probably best for you, though, to hear her own story in her own words. We have a terrific video of Teresa, and she speaks very eloquently and directly about the importance of housing and its transformative nature in people's lives. Erica, if you'd like to start the video, that would be great.